Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Holy Comforter Bible study for the last Sunday after the Epiphany. Any questions from last week, actually, is probably where we should start. Okay, so just a little sort of, okay, when I use the word liturgical, I'm just going to do a little sort of talking about the liturgy coming up. So liturgical or liturgy strictly means, see, I know the meaning of this word.
We have confidence.
Of the people, which I think is really interesting. And so it's important to remember that this is not, liturgy is not what the priest does. It's what all of us do together. And I think we all have our different roles. We can see it as a drama or a play. I have my role as the priest, but you all also have your role as the people. So it's important to remember, this is not just me wearing funny clothes doing one thing. That's just my part of the play. Y'all also have your part in the play. But kind of what's going on now is, so we have Christmas. Okay, here's a manger. That's Christmas. Then we have the Epiphany. Here's a star. Okay, so, and then over here we have Easter. Now, y'all know that Easter can move. Does everybody know the formula?
No.
First full moon after the equinox.
Yes.
Sunday closest to the first.
The first Sunday after.
After? Oh, okay.
The first Sunday after the full moon, after the vernal equinox.
That could be why I don't remember that.
That's what it is.
Okay.
Nowadays, you just Google it, right? But in other words, so that comes from the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar is based on the moon. And of course, we have a solar calendar, and that's why it's a total mess. And that's why Easter can move all over the place. So this year it's March 27th, which is really early. The earliest it can be is March 22nd. So this is really early this year. It can be as late as April something. So, yeah. Of course, that then affects the date of Ash Wednesday. Oh, sorry. That affects the date of Ash Wednesday because that has to be 40 days before Easter. It's 40 weekdays. Y'all know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Y'all know about the Sunday loophole.
Yeah.
No.
You don't know about it?
No, okay. Fasting is, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
break
so
fast.
You can break fast.
Yeah.
on-
because
No,
Sundays are
not a 40-day count.
Yeah, so Sundays are always feast days of the Lord. So if you're giving up something for Lent or whatever, you can do whatever you want on Sundays. It's the loophole. So which of course then affects the season after the Epiphany. So this is worthless. Last Epiphany can also shift depending on Easter. So that's why this season after the Epiphany has been really short. This is what we were belly aching about in Clericus with Lent. It was really short that we didn't have time to get ready for Lent. So, is everybody else warm? Are y'all warm? Are y'all okay? Okay. Just making sure. So that's kind of where we are. So last Sunday after the Epiphany, Exodus 34. We're going to read this, which is important to know. These are the second 10 commandments that Moses is bringing down right now. The first 10 commandments, he got up once, he got the 10 commandments, he came down, he saw all the people worshiping the golden calf, and he smashed them. And so now he's gone up the mountain a second time and coming down again a second time. So will somebody read 29 through 35? Anybody?
I can do it.
Cody, go for it.
Moses came down from Mount Sinai. He had the 2 tablets of the covenant in his hands. His face was shining because he had spoken with the Lord, but he didn't realize it. Aaron and all of the people of Israel saw Moses. His face was shining, so they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called out to them. So Aaron and all the leaders of the community came to him, and Moses spoke to them. After that, all of the people came near him, and he gave them all of the commandments the Lord had given him on Mount Sinai. Moses finished speaking to them, then he put a veil over his face, but when he would go to speak with the Lord, he would remove the veil. He would keep it off until he came out. Then he would tell the people what the Lord had commanded. They would see that his face was shining, so Moses would put the veil back over his face. He would keep it on until he went again to speak with the Lord.
Okay. What do y'all hear? What?
Why is his face shining? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's the question we all have, right? Like, what in
Yeah.
the world is going on?
The title of this in my Bible is The Radiant Face of Moses.
Yeah,
So-
remember, like the shining face of Moses.
Right.
I don't know. What do you think?
Like, maybe he felt like happy or at peace after speaking with
Mm-hmm.
God. But why would you want to cover that up, I guess, is my question. Right?
I'm gonna look at. Okay, so I have what I think is a pretty half-baked answer. So I kind of want to hear what y'all have to say first, because I don't know.
Well, it seems as though the purity and the goodness
Oh yeah.
is contagious. When you speak with God that intensely and that absorbed, he spent 40 days
Mm-hmm.
with God up there on the mountain, and so he just became saturated
Mm-hmm.
with the presence.
Mm-hmm.
And so the goodness and the purity of God's word
Mhm.
is probably scared him.
Yeah.
I've never seen it before.
Could it be the second time around needed to be a different approach?
Yeah, like needed to really show that this was for real. Yeah,
Maybe that's why it was a difference.
maybe. I don't know. I think, yeah. My sort of half-baked answer is that I think it's also partially that the presence of God is so different and awe-inspiring, and that he had sort of, I don't know, taken that upon himself, and that it was sort of so much that I think the veil maybe was like almost like a protective barrier that it would have overwhelmed the people who saw it clearly.
That they can only handle so much at one time.
Yeah.
So I have to kind of back off and
Yeah,
put it in perspective, and then
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
yeah. That's what I kind of think.
Kind
So
of
that he can still be approachable
Too
with
much.
him
Yeah,
and not like
yeah,
holier than
yeah.
Okay.
But I think everybody else is right too. I don't think there's like a sort of one right answer to this. But I also like that sort of, okay, I've got to show you for real.
So who was it? Was it Abraham that was afraid that if he looked on the face of God, he would die?
Yeah, this is also part of it too, is that there's this great fear in the Old Testament.
Mm.
If you see God, you're struck dead. Okay, so fast forward to the time of Jesus into the Second Temple. I'm trying to get some flow on this thing. You have the temple, and there was this sort of square area in the middle called the Holy of Holies. You know, the high priest was only allowed to go to the Holy of Holies once a year. Y'all know they tied a rope around it,
yeah.
right? So in case he went in there and saw God
They
and was
could pull him
struck
back
dead, they
out.
would be able to pull him out, right? So I think there's also a sense here too
Yeah.
that if you see the glory of God, with if the people saw that, it would be too much for them. So that's my sort of half-baked answer. I don't think it really fully describes everything though. Okay, flip over to Exodus 40. It's the very end of Exodus. So you have this cloud, this sort of glory. I think it's just interesting. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Now, keep tabernacle in mind for a little bit later on tonight. Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud settled upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Whenever the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on each stage of their journey. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not set out until the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night before the eyes of all the house of Israel at each stage of their journey. So it's almost now like that sort of glory of the Lord has been transferred to this tabernacle, this sort of meeting place. This is where the Ark of the Covenant was, where they put the Ten Commandments. Y'all have seen Indiana Jones. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? But that's also that sense, right? I mean, I think Indiana Jones picked it up, right? If you see that, your face melts, or, you know, because that's kind of what happens. Now, so next time, when we come up on Easter, y'all know we have the Paschal Candle, right?
Mhm.
Do you know what that's supposed to represent?
Like the new year? No. Oh no, that's like the Spirit of God, right?
Yeah, so it's the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire.
Oh.
How cool is that?
Wow.
Right? And so it's supposed to signify that Passover journey, because we put it out Easter, so the Passover from death to life, the Passover of the Israelites over the Red Sea. So when you see the Paschal Candle, you should think back to this, like this is representative of that glory of the Lord. Ours is plastic, it has oil in it. It's really not that sort of cool. But we'll get to what St. Paul says about it in 2 Corinthians. So look at my spiritual connection question. I found this in the commentary I was reading. Those who abide incessantly in the presence of the Lord are gradually but surely transformed into the same image from glory to glory. Sort of interesting. I think we know this too. We've met people who have spent so much time in God's presence that their presence has changed. That they you know, have you come across those people? Sort of like, they're just different, right? Can you think of anybody?
Yeah, my sweet mate in high school was like that. She just had this inner peace about her that it was so hard to describe, but it just contained. You just wanted to be around her.
Yeah.
And she's still like that now.
Yeah.
But it was just like at that young of an age, we were juniors in high school. It was very comforting to know that she was there. And
Yeah.
I think there's two people named Linda at this church.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Just like, where, you know, how is that? Yeah.
Yeah, Linda.
So yeah, it's those people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that sort of, they have spent enough time in the presence of God, you know, and that's, I think, true for all of us too. That, and here's the other thing too, is that we don't recognize that. We don't recognize that change in ourselves. It's only the community that sees it in us, right? So Moses comes down the mountain and the people see that he has changed, though he cannot tell that he has changed. So when you see these people, tell them. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've seen the face of God in each of you as well. So it takes somebody else to say that to us. Do you think your relationship with God has changed you? Yes. Yeah. You don't have to answer that now. But... Okay, let's go to 2 Corinthians 3, because then Paul sort of
Before we
plays
go
with
for
this.
this.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go for it. Yeah.
I mean, what came to mind on that part is It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh,
it's the whole thing, the
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
journey with God. What about a journey without God?
Yeah.
What would your life have been in reflection
Yeah.
without it? That
Uh-huh.
would have been interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's very different, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
I've never thought about that before.
Neither had I, but yeah, it just popped in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the question is, so what would have happened if Moses had not gone up the mountain a second time? Yeah. I don't know.
Now you can go.
Now we can move. Okay. I don't want to sit there. It's sort of a weird. Okay, 2 Corinthians chapter 3. Oh, there was one other thing. You see, I had written horns. There was a sort of another way you can translate glory to mean like horns. And so many people in the medieval church thought that Jews wore yarmulkes because they were hiding their horns. No joke.
Oh, wow.
because the sort of reading of Moses, right? They're like, oh, well, he had horns after, which is weird, which is, again, one of these places where anti-Semitism was so rampant in the church. So just sort of be careful, again, like, okay, this is, these are not horns. Just go ahead and say that. I don't think any of y'all would have read it that way, but just to know that that's sort of in the history of the translation of it. Okay, chapter 3, verse 12 through chapter 4, verse 2.
I'll read.
Yep.
Therefore, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. We are not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face to keep the Israelites from gazing at it while the radiance was fading away. But their minds were made dull, for to this day the same veil remains when the Old Covenant is read. It has not been removed, because only in Christ is it taken away. Even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil covers their hearts. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we who with unveiled faces all reflect the Lord's glory are being transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. Therefore, since through God's mercy we have this ministry, we do not lose heart. Rather, we have renounced secret and shameful ways. We do not use deception, nor do we distort the word of God. On the contrary, by setting forth the truth plainly, we commend ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of God.
Thank you. So clearly playing off Moses. This is the people who put together the lectionary are smart. They put these texts together so that we go, oh yeah, cool. Okay, what do y'all hear? What do you read?
This makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
Because to me, when you cover your face after seeing God, it's kind of like putting a bushel over your light. You've got to let it shine. So I think it's a little bit more like sharing it with other people. And so that makes more sense to me.
I think there's also a sense that what he's saying is that now in Christ we can see God face to face. There doesn't have to be a veil or a barrier between us and God. It's sort of that same image, when Jesus dies and the curtain of the temple is torn in two. That, the curtain that sort of kept apart God and the Holy of Holies has now been torn open. There is no barrier anymore. In the same way, the veil has been removed. Okay, Old Covenant. Okay, so New Covenant. Well, we hear this every Sunday, right? So there's also that same this is the new thing. That veil is taken away. We now have a new covenant. And then look at verse 15. Indeed, to this very day, whenever Moses is read, so the Old Testament. And shocker of shockers, the Jews don't call the Old Testament the Old Testament.
It's the current testament.
Yeah, it's just
the testament.
Right. So you can buy it. It's really interesting. It's called the Tanakh. Is the sort of what they would read. It's translated. So our Old Testaments are mostly translated from the Greek version of the Old Testament. They translated from the Hebrew version of the Old Testament. So it's called the Tanakh. It's got 3 parts to it. And I forgot all the Hebrew words. But essentially it's the law, which are the first 5 books, the prophets, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Daniel, and the writings. But what he's talking about here is Moses, the lawgiver, the first 5 books, the Pentateuch, the Torah. So just so y'all know then what the other sort of sections are. What else y'all read? Look at verse 18. And all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror. Remember we talked about this last time? They made mirrors in Corinth, right? So Paul, again, is being very clever. Being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. Okay, so being transformed, I think it's important. You see my little schematic there. So for the benefit of everybody out there, so you have, you see, first I have justification. See, I think a lot of times we think, I don't know, I'm putting thoughts into your minds. There, at least one point in my life, I thought there was like sort of one thing, like you were either saved or not saved, and that was it. Like sort of you're going to heaven or you're not. It's really interesting when you really start sort of digging into what all these different words meant in the first century. You actually see there's more of a spectrum they're talking about. So justification is the first thing. And that's like us saying that God is a judge and that he has acquitted us. You know, judges have that power to simply say, he's not saying you didn't do that, but he's saying, I'm no longer holding you liable, right? So that's the first sort of, I think, thing that happens, is that we're acquitted. And then there's a sense of salvation. And salvation doesn't necessarily mean just going to heaven. It can also mean healing, which I think is also, it's almost, I think, a more holistic way of looking at it. So it's not just like your soul, it's your whole being is being healed from the thing you have been acquitted of. Paul sometimes talks about we are being saved, which I think is also a healthier way, because we all know this, right? In our Christian journey, we've had moments of clarity and not clarity, of doing right and doing wrong. And I think that's kind of what Paul's getting at, is like, we're on this process of healing.
It's a journey, not a specific point.
Yeah. And then the end goal that we hope is sanctification, sort of being made holy. Sanctus, you know, the song we sing, Holy, Holy, Holy Lord, it's called the Sanctus or Saint. So then that's the sort of end of the journey, we hope, is sort of being made holy. And I think we have seen, like we said, we've seen glimpses of this in people that we know. And we've seen glimpses in ourselves as well, but it's also just all part of a spectrum. And I think, you know, we kind of are all along here, probably all at the same time. You know, we're all sort of, so, but this is the goal to which we're moving. I think that's important. So that's the process of transformation then. Y'all are much happier with this than the earlier group. They were sort of thrown into a tizzy. So this is good. Well, just, you know, this sort of, you know, the process of it, being saved. I think this word too, it's like a salve, right? Like it's a healing. This is why the ancients called Jesus the good physician. Because and here's the hard part too, we can't do this process. God does this to us. We have to go to the doctor, but the doctor's the one who actually sort of does the work for us. You know, you break a leg, you can't heal it. The doctor's got to put a splint on the leg. And sometimes it just takes time and the doctors help to get there. So that's the other part too, is that this is not our own work. This is us being open to God to let God do that work upon us. It's also frustrating because I think we want to do it, right? We want to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We want to sort of, I want to be better. I want to be holier. I want to do these things. And it's like, well, you can't. You just have to let yourself be open to God's work to do that in your life and to be responsive to God as God reaches out to you. How's that?
Yeah, I think that's why I never really felt like you'd be saved or you wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Because I never went to a church that preached that.
Yeah. You were raised an Episcopalian though.
I know.
Yeah.
So I never really I never thought of it
Yeah.
that way. I mean, I just,
Yeah.
it was, you always had the ability and
Yeah.
it was always part of your life to lead it in the way that it,
Yeah.
I never
Well,
thought
it's
of, I
part
mean,
part of some denominations.
it is. And that I felt
It's
sorry.
like, all you have to do is say, I believe.
Right.
And you're home.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very different.
Right.
It's
Right.
That, yeah, there's appealing to, that way they can appeal to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Even those people who don't have the
Yeah.
wherewithal to do all
Or
that.
the exclusionary or,
Yeah.
yeah, I never bought into all that.
Would you like to hear my crazy church theory? So my crazy church theory is that some denominations who sort of buy into that, like if you're saved or whatever, this is why they are so intent on having huge children's ministries. Because the idea is like, well, if you can get that child sort of saved, then they're okay. What I think is really interesting is looking around this room and that we'd all say we're all different ages, but we're all still on the journey together. And I think that to me is a much healthier model, sort of the constant maturing process. And we were just talking about that in that building committee meeting, right? Of making sure that there is space set aside for children's education, but also for adult education, because the journey is never over. The hope is that we still are learning about God even on our deathbed. So, which I think is really cool. I think that's just that sort of holistic
They
image.
also lock people in with that.
Yeah.
You've been
Well,
saved, so now you stay
Not
here.
an-
And
It's not an entire lockdown because
No.
most people go through periods of their life and they reevaluate. And certainly teenagers, that's what teenagers is all about.
Yeah.
And they're going to start reevaluating.
Yeah.
And they're going to start asking questions. And so it's not a one
no,
Yeah.
I do think if
opportunity.
when they've been exposed as young
Yes.
people, then they do pull away and they do find their own, some of them, but they don't feel it's not an unknown.
Mhm.
So if they go back,
Mhm.
they have a comfort of at least knowing they can, what happens if I walk through the door again and what the service is like.
Yeah.
And the kids that never have that,
Yeah.
that's a scary proposition to walk into a church, like you were saying, someone that just can't make it in with
Yeah,
the drive-by.
Totally. Yeah.
So I always felt like at least if they had some comfort there at some point,
Yeah.
there was a better
Totally.
percentage
Yeah.
of them coming back,
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
going to church despite their
Yeah.
parents at 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, of course, I'm totally making theories up. I could be right. I could be wrong. I don't know. Probably wrong. But
No, I think
I know what you're saying, though. Yeah.
Well, the path is just as individual as the person.
Yeah.
If everybody reacts differently to it, everybody hears the word differently.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to do something. You can't just create a mold to fit everybody.
No.
Yeah.
It's a good idea for the social spread.
Sure.
All you have to do is say, I believe
Yeah.
you're in, but in reality, it's just.
Experiences.
It's transformation, right?
Everything.
It's the process of transformation. Okay. Oh, you're fine. Okay, let's go. Luke 9. Transfiguration. So, sort of give you the visuals. Here's Jesus being transfigured into glory. Here's Moses and Elijah. Here are Peter, James, and John. They go to sleep because they're always sleeping, apparently. And just sort of as you're reading this, think also to next time we meet Jesus on a hill, is of course there are two people next to him, but they're criminals. So there's also this weird juxtaposition then, right? Because then we get to the Passion story and we're like, whoa, wait, we've already met Jesus on a mountain with people on his right hand and his left, but it was Moses and Elijah. We're like, whoa, this is a really cool juxtaposition. So 28 through the first, let's just read 28 to 36. That's the sort of meat of it.
About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in a glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy. But when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men standing with him. As the men were leaving, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what he was saying.
Oh, keep going to 36.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine.
While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and enveloped them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, who I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and told no one at that time what they had seen.
Great. Thank you. Okay.
So why did Peter not know what he was saying?
Yeah, so it comes across as like, Peter, you're an idiot, right? Not knowing what he said. I think what's going on is he's being a good Jew, right? Because we know from the story of Moses, like when you see the glory of the Lord, you build a tabernacle to contain it. I think the sort of not knowing what he said is implying that this glory cannot be contained. That this is more that can fit in a tabernacle or a temple or whatever. That this is so big that it's got to keep going out. I think that's how I read it.
And plus to separate Jesus from Moses and Elijah.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard commentaries where the 3 structures were for the disciples, and they wanted to stay there always.
Mm.
And because it was such an experience.
Yeah,
They didn't
yeah.
want it to stop.
Yeah.
They wanted always to be able
Yeah.
to stay there.
Yeah.
It wasn't intended that
Yeah.
they should live there. Everybody had to
Right.
come off the mountain and
Right.
go out into the world.
We know this, right? We call these mountaintop experiences. You've had them spiritually and you want to stay there. We talked about this, I think, last time, right?
Mhm.
I encountered this a lot of times with youth, right? They go to like a happening or a yes. I'm like, oh my
The
God.
high is just
Right. They're up here. And then like Monday morning, you're like, honey, you're back in school. Like, I'm really sorry to tell you, but you can't live there. And maybe that's also part of the not knowing what he said was like, Peter, come on, man. There's more to it than this. And they were terrified, like good Jews. If the glory of the Lord is coming, you're going to be terrified. I think a lot, and so I think this is a good lesson for us as Christians who have sort of domesticated God a little bit. Like Jesus, God is almost too close. So y'all know that praise song, I want to see your face. I want to know you more. I think the ancient Jews would be like, no, I do not want to see God's face. Like, please, no. Like, so there's a little bit something that we can learn there of the sort of the otherness of God. I like the song. It's just sort of,
It's an interesting way to put that domesticated.
yeah.
Something to be said.
Americanized.
Yeah.
Spark of lightning that you're trying to-
Right, but we sort of made this, who created the world, and sort of like something that is like, oh, it fits nicely here on my shelf. Like,
I wear it when it works.
right. Let's see. Okay, so Elijah represents the prophets, Moses represents the law, and it's important both Elijah and Moses in the Old Testament go up a mountain and they meet God. So this is sort of subtly saying Jesus is God, because here they all are on a mountain talking together. And then you have the echoes in the other scriptures, the baptism of Jesus, the voice from the cloud says, "This is my son, my beloved." The Annunciation to Mary, when the angel Gabriel says, "You're going to have this baby," what he says, she goes, "Well, how does that happen?" The angel Gabriel says, "Don't worry, the Holy Spirit will overshadow you." And so it's interesting, that's the same word. That sort of being enveloped, I think, is the other one. Yeah. then the shepherds and the angels at Christmas, they're terrified by the glory of the Lord as it shines upon them. What else? What anything else that you hear? No? Is no verse 36, the end of it, and they kept silent in those days, told no one any of the things they had seen. I think what's happening here is that they're told to keep silent so that nobody gets this confused as the big deal when it's really this is the big deal. Like, this only now makes sense because of this. And I think then this is why you have to like sort of get to the other side saying, oh, this transfiguration makes sense because he's been crucified and risen. You would kind of understand that if Peter, James, and John went down and said like, oh my God, we just saw with Moses and Elijah. Part of my question is, how do they know what Moses and Elijah look like? But putting that aside, you want that to happen because then all the Jews would be saying like, Jesus is king. Let's go, like, let's make him king. Like, okay, well, he's going to be made king, though it looks different. He's not going to be, it's all that sort of upside down paradox of it all. Okay, so my connections here. Have you ever had an epiphany? What did you learn? How was God revealed to you? Have you ever had an epiphany? I mean, you didn't have to see the glory of the Lord, but was there, a time that sort of it all made sense in a moment? You don't have to share. I know it's sort of a big question, but think about that. And then think about how you got to imagine Peter, James, and John then would have been different. They would now see the whole world through a different lens. And I think that's what epiphanies do to us. It's not about that instant. It's about then how do you go down the mountain and then how do you see the world differently because of what you have seen there? I think that's the hard part that we've got to do about like youth retreats and whatnot. It's how do you now take this, not knowing that you're not going to have this sort of spiritual high all the time, but how do you use this now as a framework to live?
Well, and epiphanies also, when they happen, how large or small, it's going backwards and making sense of things that led up to that.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily just that moment. It's bundling up the loose ends to bring you to that moment.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point because right before this, I don't even think about this. Look in chapter 9, verse 18, 19, and 20. Once when Jesus was praying alone with only the disciples near him, he asked them, who do the crowd say that I am? They answered, John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and so others that one of the ancient prophets has risen. He said to them, but who do you say that I am? Peter answered, the Messiah of God. So it's sort of like, okay, you said it, now you're ready to see it. Tying up those loose ends. Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that.
It kind of led to it, and then it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Just all is there.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? So we're going to take, like I said, next Wednesday off. I've printed the text for Ash Wednesday and the first time in Lent, if you want to look at those. Yeah. Thank you all for joining us.